have this evidence that's showing us that if we eat from 12 to 7 or whatever model of time works for you, it's going to help me burn and mobilize fat. It's going to reduce my risk of so many modern day diseases. It's a no-brainer.
We still believe this crazy myth that fat is bad for you.
Fat is not bad for you.
Good fats, fat made by God, are good for you. Fats made by man are probably not good for you.
You can't just go out and do a CrossFit workout every day and necessarily expect to get the results that you want, or go on a special diet and get the results that you want. So it's very multimodal, multifactorial, and there's a variety of reasons people are resistant to weight loss.
Well, you know, it's it. Welcome to the final installment of The Real Skinny on Fat, the truth about weight loss. I'm Montel Williams.
And I'm Naomi Whittle.
And listen, Naomi, it's time to bring it home. I mean, we've done this now for 8 episodes in a row. People should be getting it home. It's time to take charge of your life, take charge of your diet, and understand that there's something out there that's called good fat, right?
It's so interesting to learn that we can go from being a sugar burner to a fat burner, and it depends on the types of fats.
Okay, well, I think our first guest, I know her. It's Kellyanne Petrucci, right?
That's right.
Okay, yeah. Tell us about that interview.
Dr. Kellyanne is a really interesting woman because she focuses on something that so many of us had never even heard of, and that's the importance of bone broth. So she's a nutritionist, she's an expert, and she's a woman who really walks the walk.
And you know, again, when the experts that you've put together, if you think about it, what we've talked about before, it's all about eating not because of the economy, but eating the way we did before there were microwaves, before there were ovens. And if you think back, you know, when we were on the savannah, you know, all the lions, tigers, and bears, oh my God, all the meat.
Right.
That bone that was left over was nutrition for us. So this is really good. You got to take a look at this.
I'm Dr. Kellyanne Petrucci, but my patients call me Dr. Kellyanne. I'm the author of drkellyanne.com and the book from Rodell Publishing, Dr. Kellyanne's Bone Broth Diet. Bone broth is so simple. Bone broth is so delicious, and it has such amazing power. There's a couple of things that you need to do to really get well, to really be slim, and to really be young. You've got to get that inflammation down. You've got to heal your gut. And you have to really train your body to become a natural fat burner. And bone broth does all of that. And if you were to ask me, what is the one thing that I could take over 20 plus years of practice, what would it be? I'd say it's bone broth. When you find out that you can make bone broth for about $2 a pound, wow. And it takes about 5 minutes or under to make, what I say is you got no excuses. And if you're a working mom,
Yes.
You're not going to believe how easy this is, because here's what you can do. You just take a healthy, organic, pasture-raised chicken and you throw it in the pot. There's only really 3 ingredients that are absolutely necessary. There's the bones,
Right.
there's water, and then some apple cider vinegar that we sprinkle over top, about 2 teaspoons. Then whatever it is you like. So I like celery in mine. So this is how easy this is. All you do is give it 1 chop. Carrots are so crazy easy that you really don't even need a knife. You just, just break them, throw them in there. I also love to add onion. And peeling it, you can peel it if you want. Not necessary though. The same thing with garlic. This is so easy and quick. All you do is throw it in. This is the last thing that you need to get in your head about. I mean, we have so many things during the day that we're thinking about. Making bone broth is not one of them. So either putting this on before you go to bed, and then you wake up to like this amazing smell all throughout your house, tastes great, or you can just in the morning before you go to work or whatever you have to do, before you're with the kids all day, Bam, super easy. You're gonna put some water in here. We've got our filtered water here. We're gonna put that in, and we want the water to be about at level or about 1 inch before all the ingredients in here. And then we're gonna add some apple cider vinegar. You wanna measure out between 1 and 2 teaspoons. But I don't actually measure it because I've done it so many times, just a little dab. What you wanna do is just cook this for about 8 hours because it's already cooked. The longer that you cook at the slower temperature, that's when all that good stuff comes out. This is something that's been around forever, and now it's coming back into the diet, and I'm so glad it is because it will get you results. It really is what I call liquid gold. All right.
Hi, Kellyanne.
Hello, Marco. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Fantastic. So
Welcome.
I need some of this good broth.
Okay.
What do you got for me today?
I typically have the hearth broth with ginger and turmeric. Do you want to try that?
Are you kidding?
Okay.
Hook me up.
You got it. I think everybody can relate to the flavor. Everybody has a memory of their mom or their grandmother making chicken soup.
Yeah.
You know, I like to call it the world's first comfort food. And then you start going through all the stuff you and I know about how great it is for you.
What it can really do for you.
Yeah, it's like double whammy. I mean, I would say 7 out of 10 people who come to that window have a story. And they all express so much gratitude for the fact that there's a place that they can come and get a hot cup of broth.
Oh, yeah.
I'll take some pork bones and some lamb bones and some beef bones and some chicken bones, and it doesn't have to be this rigid thing. It's like throw a bunch of cartilage and bones in a pot and cook it for 18 hours.
I totally agree. It's easy, it's practical, and it's so powerful that it's certainly worth the time. So for the very busiest of people, what would you tell them? How would you go about it?
Sure. Well, for one, I would tell them not to be afraid of the 18 hours because it's not work time, it's just stove time. So
yes.
Get comfortable with leaving things on your stove overnight really low because that's when the transformation happens and the magic happens.
You say about 18 hours is what you recommend.
Yeah. Yep.
And same for chicken and beef?
I think chicken you could do less because the bones are much smaller.
Yeah.
I think you can get a really good extraction from chicken in as little as 8 hours, up to 12 hours. And also, if you leave it uncovered, which is kind of, I think, essential, because you want that evaporation and that concentration to happen. You could put all kinds of things in this to flavor it. So ginger is a cool thing to microplane into it. Fresh raw garlic is nice to microplane into it. If you can get your hands on some fresh turmeric and grate that in there.
I love it. It's an anti-inflammatory. So these are all anti-inflammatory.
Mix it with some black pepper.
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident that this could be a very powerful, important piece to anyone who wants to get healthy. Right.
I completely agree.
I really believe that.
We look to other ways to accomplish what we can accomplish simply with food. Make sure that when you eat your meals, there's a protein, there's a healthy fat, and there's vegetables, because that's what helps you become that natural fat burner. It's the building block of everything. And those healthy fats, they are so important. We want to add things like coconut milk. It's got all those components in there. They're those natural wrinkle blasters, and it also helps you pull stored body fat. So we talked about how you really lose weight. To burn fat, you have to eat fat, the good fats, like grass-fed butter. Ghee is also great. Nuts and seeds, all fantastic fats, and they really are a great replacement to most of the fats that we see in our cabinets. Guacamole is something that I have in my diet all of the time. It'll make all the difference. It'll make you feel good. It'll help you lose weight, and it'll make your skin look amazing. One of the things that you have to be careful of when you're dealing with fats is the omega-6 to the omega-3 ratio. These are your bad fat to your good fat ratio. The inflammatory fats, the 6s that are more inflammatory, those omega-6s, we want them low. Right. I talk a lot about brothing and bone broth, and I love green juices and combining these two things and eating all these fat-burning foods. Learning and adopting these philosophies, you can get slimmer, you can get younger, and you can get healthier. You can do it naturally with just food. So I'm here in Hell's Kitchen in New York City, and I'm so happy to be in Indie Fresh.
When we started the concept, we set out to make healthy food accessible for everyone. We wanted to get out of the gimmicks of juice cleanses, sort of starvation to get into whatever physical shape you wanted to be in, and really offer a sustainable way of eating. So we started with soups, and now we have a full range of products ranging from broths, mashes, smoothies. What's really neat about this is it's clean, obviously gluten-free and dairy-free, 100% vegan, and it's a new category. So as you can see, it's in a bottle. It's a chilled drinkable soup.
So what is this?
This is the broccoli coconut hemp curry.
Okay.
So you pop the top, you could drink it cold, or you could put it in a saucepan and heat it.
I want people to really key in on this, because there isn't a meal that someone can bring me that I can't turn it around into something healthy.
So we did that a lot with a lot of our dishes. So like everyone does a butternut squash soup, really. And I think ours, we wanted to make it different. So it actually is our most complex soup, and it has the most ingredients in a way. We had to come up with alternatives, and it was only through kind of exploring all these different ingredients. So in this particular case, we steam onions until they start turning sweet. And then we add coriander seeds that have been roasted, and a little arborio rice or rice starch, it's a very small amount, and then almond milk. And then we simmer all that together until it gets really thick, and then we puree it until it's smooth.
We've really experimented with things to make sure that they're actually healthy by using maybe chia seeds to make something have a different texture and thicken it up versus just those things that we could use as fillers. They're never going to do that here. We don't want to do that here. Everything we're adding is actually giving some sort of benefit, which is the whole point of it.
It's a chef-based, nutritionist-backed sort of concept. So everything goes through multiple iterations before it could make it out here and into the customer's hands. So I think to me that's the inspiration really behind the brand.
So these are, give you a bison meatball. Traditional meatballs have breadcrumbs and cheese and things to kind of bind it together. We do use eggs, but we also use things like rice crackers. We use cashew puree in here as one of the thickeners. And then we also use like a little bit of curry powder.
When you incorporate healthy fats and bone broth, and you incorporate all of these fat-burning foods, you will have the breakthrough you're looking for. You become awakened, and you live your life on purpose.
Welcome, Dr. Kellyanne, Dr. Kellyanne Petrucci. It is an incredible honor to have you here. You have done so much for women, for women's health, for men and women, but I'm very partial to what you've done even for my own health. You taught me several years ago that I could transform my fine lines and wrinkles through drinking broth.
And you know, the amazing thing is, you really can. So it all started for me, Naomi, when I turned 40 and I wasn't getting results with anything I was doing. And this was really frustrating to me because I thought, you know, here I am providing information on the clinic floor every day. Why is nothing working for me? And that's where bone broth came in. It changed my life. It changed my patient's life. And I said, I have to get this out there. I have to get this on a broader scale because I can't believe something so simple, what it can really do for you.
It's truly remarkable. So for most of America, we've heard about bone broth. I spent a lot of time in Asia, and in Asia, bone broth is used every single day. It's either at lunch or at dinner. But here in the US, it's a really different concept. Can you give us a little bit of background around bone broth and why and how did you get interested in it originally?
Yeah, so I always say, I just brought bone broth onto everyone's table. I didn't invent it. Actually, it's been around since the hunter-gatherer times. They used to actually carve out the stomach of an animal, and they would make this broth in the intestines of the animal. Wow. That's how long it's been around. You know, it's been sitting there on the fireplace, you know, steaming away and cooking away for all these families for years and years. It's very sustainable because you use all parts of the animal. But the real beauty is there's so much nutrition. There's low calories, high nutrition, and that's how we get well, and that's how we stay well. You've got beautiful protein in there. You've got the building blocks of collagen in there. You want those amino acids, you want those minerals. It doesn't get any better than this. So immediately your body comes to life, because the whole trick here is that we need to really push out the toxins, pull in the nutrition. And when we can do that simply and we can do that easily, bam, the magic happens.
So you're telling us that you took the bone broth,
Yes.
really from this hunter-gatherer life that it's been part of creating health for that long, and you brought it onto the American table.
Yes.
And what are the kind of results that your patients have been seeing?
So this is what was amazing to me, and I learned so many principles and practices by actually watching this. What we saw was that people got slimmer, younger, faster. So my original premise was, I'm going to use this to get so healthy. I want to be bionic. I want to be so healthy. And the side effects were just incredible. And then I started documenting. And when we started documenting and we really saw the results, my gosh, we evaluated hundreds and thousands of people at this time, and people were losing weight. After 21 days, we were seeing incredible differences. They were losing 14, 15 pounds, 4 inches around their waist, and this was typical. So as a practitioner, when you start to see results that are typical, that gets your attention. And that's why I really decided, I have to make this a system that's easy for people to follow, because there's something really magical and foundational that's going on with this. And so that's really how the whole revolution started.
I know with you and your client base, you can't talk about a lot of your clients because of their celebrity status and,
Yes.
and what they do in the world. But for those individuals that are on camera all the time, faster, better, more, beauty, youth is what it's all about, right?
Well, it's about getting twofers. Nobody wants to do one thing at a slow, methodical time. We are in an era now where it's got to be quick. It's got to be quick, instantaneous results in everything we're doing. That's just how we've revolutionized medicine, really, in general. So stars, when they've got an engagement coming up, and oftentimes they find out about a lot of their projects, and it's go time. They find out it's go time. And that's when I get the call. What do I do? And the thing about bone broth is it gets you super charged up, because it does a couple of things that are really interesting. The amino acids in there, like the glycine, it helps you sleep better. Now, how does that sound? How many people do you know out there that are saying, I can't sleep anymore? The glycine really helps you to sleep. And the protein in the bone broth is such a good form of protein that it really helps people stabilize their insulin. And we know that insulin lays down fat. So we really want to watch that insulin, reduce that insulin, and have it reduce and stay at that level. And so taking all of this into account, the system that I came up with is what really changed things. And that's, now get this, using bone broth to fast. And so fasting with bone broth, that's where the real magic in bone broth can happen. And that's where you'll really see the results that so many people are looking for. So many people say, oh my gosh, I'm dealing with this crisis, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, all these inflammatory-based diseases, because a lot of these modern day diseases that we're seeing today, there's a common underpinning. And that common underpinning is inflammation. So the trick, if you were to take all of my patients over 24 years of practice, if you were to put them in a football field and you were to say, what got everybody better? It's this. It's when they reduced inflammation, it's when they healed the gut, and it's when they trained the body to become a natural fat burner. When those three things happen, the magic happen and their lives change. And bone broth was the one thing, the one simple, inexpensive, easy to get, easy to make thing that made the difference. And I said, oh my gosh, it seems like such an oversimplification. Really, bone broth? I studied in Europe, studied in Switzerland. I learned all of these interesting modalities, really cool lab testing modalities. Why am I spending all of my time talking about something like bone broth? Because it's just that good. It's just that good. It gets multiple things done with just a simple sipping your way to health.
I love it. So this twofer idea,
Yes.
How long does it take for you, for your patients, to start to see the transformative effects? For example, even on the gut, like where do we start to see it first, and how and when does it start really with the gut?
Yeah, so it's an inflammatory process, the gut, because inflammation oftentimes starts in the gut. We have something in our gut called Peyer's patches, and this is really important. This is where your immunity happens, and as we know it, everything rises and falls really on your immune system. So one of the wonderful things that bone broth and bone broth fasting can do, and we'll talk more about that, it heightens your immunity in a big way. So depending on where that process is in your body, that makes all of the difference to the results and how fast you're going to get these results. You will get results, but for some people it's 4 to 7 days. It's after they get through that time where your body has to make that switch. It goes through a lot of times what we call the carb flu, where you're switching from that carb burning to that fat burning. And the beauty is you're burning stored fat. And when I say stored fat, I'm talking here here, the gut, all those places where we have such a hard time burning fat. And through bone broth fasting, you mobilize fat. And the first place where you start mobilizing fat is in your gut. And that brings us to the whole idea and the whole concept behind belly fat. And belly fat is dangerous fat, and we need to do something about it.
So this fat that you're talking about that we can start to mobilize by incorporating bone broth and doing bone broth fasting, this fat, tell us a little bit about the level of toxicity in that fat, because there's a lot of concern, understandably, like you just said, that belly fat that surrounds our organs, it is toxic fat.
It certainly is toxic. So if you pinch an inch, that's your subcutaneous fat. But there's something even more deadly going on in your body, and that's fat that encircles or engulfs your viscera or your organs. This is where all the fat's pulled from for heart disease and all of these problems. It's like a brew, a cauldron of toxicity. And this is where we have to do something, and we have to mobilize this fat. The fastest way to really do this is burn that off through fasting. And I can even take that to a different level, if I may. And that is, and here's probably the most important thing I'm going to say in this interview, how you really get this done, and you get it done efficiently, and you get it done effectively, is that you burn fat in a certain amount of time. I call it your slim window.
Really?
You have a window of time in which you eat, and that will make a huge difference. In fact, there are studies that were done that showed that mice that had availability to bad food 24 hours a day, they got sick and fat. Now, mice that had availability to food, same food, bad food, over a shortened period of time, they did not get sick. They did not get fat. That is a really interesting piece of data. So I applied that data to a belly fat study, and what I found is that in 10 days, and this is true, in 10 days, applying the principle of your eating window, your go time, that will make a huge difference in mobilizing this fat and that visceral fat in the gut.
It's remarkable to hear that, and there's so much research right now around this scheduled eating and moving away from the way we've been taught to really eat in this country, right? So we're grazers. We graze constantly. And now what you're saying is really schedule the times that you're eating. So give us an example of what you do. Tell us what
it's mind-blowing. So what I do is I don't eat in the morning. And this is what's so beautiful about bone broth. I sip on bone broth in the morning. So I typically, depending on my schedule, I won't start physically eating, till about 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. This works beautifully, and I know people are saying, do not tell me not to eat. That's going to hurt. And I don't like this word fasting, but really, there's comfortable fasting. If you're one of those people that say, you know what, I don't feel good fasting, it makes my blood sugar drop, or I do want to address that. Fasting actually does reduce your blood sugar, but it reduces it and it stays there. So when you apply fasting and you apply good fasting principles, your blood sugar is not, that's a myth. It actually lowers and then it stabilizes. And then the other thing that we always hear is, you know what? It's going to ruin my metabolism. You know that fasting, that can't be good. Again, that's an old story. Norepinephrine is actually heightened during the fasting process, and this actually revs up your metabolism. So these are all good things. This is all good data. Growth hormone, we want growth hormone elevated. Guess what fasting does? It elevates your growth hormone. So that puts on lean muscle. Again, that all lends itself to burning fat. So between about 12 to 7, I apply these principles to get those results, and it works beautifully. And here's the beautiful thing about it. As a woman, we're busy. We're really busy. I have children. I have a career. I have a lot of things going on. I have things that are important to me. And I can do an awful lot. And I don't have that on my mind. I mean, how many of us are out there right now that are listening and watching and saying, you know what? I have it on my mind all the time. Should I eat that? Should I not eat that? Is this the right time? Is this the wrong? We are aimless. When it comes to eating, we're aimless. Well, how about if we make this simple? How about if we just stop all that nonsense and we say, you know what? There is a system out there that we know is tried and true. We know, because I'm a very evidence-based nutritionist. For me, it has to be evidence-based. Here we have this evidence that's showing us that if we eat from 12 to 7 or whatever model of time works for you, it's going to help me burn and mobilize fat. And more importantly, it's going to reduce my risk of so many modern day diseases and belly fat. I mean, it's a no-brainer. So I really hope everyone at least tries that one thing, that eating window trick or that slim window, to make a big difference in really getting that stored fat, getting it gone.
You made a comment about it being scary or overwhelming.
Yes.
And give us a couple of the techniques that you share with your patients to help them get through those initial few days of trying it.
Yes, it's all about knowledge. So when you know it's coming, when you know the freight train's coming, you know how to avoid all of the pitfalls. Like anything else, there's pitfalls. So the first thing I always tell people is that understand what your body has channels, and it has gates, and it has mechanisms that are these gates that are constantly changing and moving and working for you. And when you go on a program like this or a lifestyle change like this, your body is going to start utilizing different things to operate. So instead of your body and your brain saying, you know what, that bagel is what drove me, it's what operated me, it's what made me have energy, your brain is going to literally throw a hissy fit tantrum. There's even documentation of dreams, having food dreams. This is your brain screaming out, what happened to the bagel, lady? Give me the bagel. Where's the pasta? So you really have to know this, and it typically happens with people around day 4 to day 7. You go through something called the carb flu, so know what it is, understand it, and realize that you may want to kick everything and everyone, but you have to get to the other side of that. So how do we thwart that? Well, we drink a lot of water and fat. Fat is so beautiful. Fat is the most beautiful thing ever. We have to start looking at that as a positive connotation and not a negative one, because fat is what propels our cells. Every cell that we have, it propels. So not only do we have cells in our body, all of those 60 trillion cells, we've got 100 trillion microbes in our body. These are bugs. Now, that shouldn't freak anyone out because we're literally bags of bugs. That's what we are. So we have to feed these, and we need those intestines, those 25 feet of intestines. We need to house those properly and healthfully. And so much of that has to do with fat and having our cells bounce and propel beautifully. We don't want them coagulated and stuck. We want them bouncy. Right?
And how does the fat make our cells bounce?
Because the membrane around our cells are fat-based, and it feeds that and it nourishes that. So important.
So a lot of people will say, okay, Dr. Kellyann, you're beautiful, you're glowing, you've clearly been doing things correctly, you're a doctor, you know these things, and you're thin. So it's easy for you to say that fat is beautiful.
I can't even have you finish that sentence without me chiming in on that. Because if you are a woman and you are listening, then you know the decade change. You know inherently and intuitively the life cycle changes. When you are 20, there's certain things that your body goes through. And in your 30s, there's 40s, 50s, and I can even speak to women in their 50s. Yes, I'm there. So there are always challenges, and I have my challenges. I've had many challenges, but here's what I know. I'm very straight and aligned with what I know works, because Naomi, here's what I know. I know that we're designed to eat certain foods. And actually, the New England Journal of Medicine has done studies and research that says these are the foods that work best for you. We are actually genetically inclined to eat foods that work better for our metabolism, for our digestion, for our brain, for our whole functionality. So why not incorporate some of these practices and principles, like bone broth just fits in so beautifully. Why not incorporate some of that? So for me, I have just learned. I have learned through the process of what I've done for a living. I've been lucky enough to have chosen this for a living. something I was born to do. And now I'm able to incorporate it and I'm able to teach it, because what people say is all the time, you must really have good genes. You must really have good genes. I don't care what genes you have. It is the environment that you put yourself in and you choose to stay in. Your environment is going to set the trigger for your choices and your decisions. So in order to be very yes, have absolutely complete clarity, it's just a matter of knowing some things. And that's what this whole series is about, having people seed themselves with being in the know. And so everything that I talk about and all the systems and everything that I do, it's all about, do you know that there are things that your body is designed to do, to feel, to the way you move, the way you think. It's actually by design. And once you understand that and you make that a part of your life and your lifestyle, man, it gets easier. You get so much more, there's no more aimlessness. And so the reason why age is working well for me is simply because I know these things. That's it, because I know these things.
When did you start to know these things? Because when you look even at the food pyramid or the transformation that is made now to the plate, the USDA has told us we need certain amounts of grains and so forth. What transformed in you that allowed you to embrace really probably a very contrarian view?
Always been a contrarian, always. And it started for me as really having a different education. I'm a Swiss-trained doctor. So I've had a European background. And it's interesting because how they look at it there is, if it works, use it, and and we'll prove it later. And I guess there's good and bad to everything, but they really do a lot of forward thinking models. They use a lot of forward thinking practices and principles. And so that's how I was trained. And so my paradigm has been very different for many, many years. And when you have it, you either have a paradigm in a certain way or you don't. So my paradigm is different in such that I look to blaze a trail. What else is there? So I look at health and I look at systems of the body, and this is how I create all of my products and everything that I do, to revolutionize. How do you take it up a notch? How do you 10x this? This is great, but is that all there is? Is that all there is? So I became a mechanic of the mind in a sense when it comes to the human body and understanding the matrix of the body. So I took a different dive, a different look into the body and understanding through the Swiss models about how stress falls in the body, about how stress, by the way, is really the biggest thing that anchors and hits the body in ways that we probably don't even understand yet. It's so massively important. So everything that we do, even food, has to soothe that. And it has to really combat the stress that our body goes through in modern day all of the time. So really looking at the body in a very different way and understanding how things fall and surface in the body and how we really open that up. We have to really open the body up to healing. And see, bone broth, it literally, and that's why it was used way back in hospitals, which I'd love to see that happen again. It literally opens up your intestines to healing, and it welcomes in all of that nutrition, all of those nutrients. And that's what we have to do from head to toe. So everything, I embody everything that will do that. Again, sticking to that mantra. What is going to flood in nutrition and pull out toxins all of the time? One of the reasons why I love the things like bone broth and things like collagen is because for me, I want to do it naturally. I want to do, so for people who use injectables and all of that, that's a personal choice. But for me, again, I stick to that mantra. Nutrition in, toxins out. Does it accomplish that? Because if it doesn't, it has to be a no for me.
That's fascinating, and that's a really good analogy, just thought process. Again, it goes back to this twofer concept that you said, okay, it's got to be able to do more than one thing. Toxins out, nutrition in, and this idea as well. So thinking about what you're sharing with us, Kellyanne, is always two-part. There being
a
two-part
parts
to
thing.
it.
And then also, as women, beauty is important. It just is. Again, understanding our genes, how we're created, how really what we're supposed to be, and allowing us to say, you know what, I really find it powerful to be beautiful. Because guess what? There's a lot of power in beauty.
Absolutely.
And you just can't negate that. You can't negate those effects. So to me, the most beautiful way to be powerful and the most beautiful way to be beautiful is to do it just like that. To really say, how can I heighten my energy in such a way? And when I say energy, I mean your real energy, your physical energy that really that makes people say, what is it about her? I want to be around her. I want to be near her. I want to be in her energy. This all comes from this megahertz, this thing that's going on in our body all the time. It really stems from these practices. And when you learn to use these things like the eating window, and when you're incorporating things like bone broth, you're incorporating things like collagen, which I love, you get that two-for effect. I mean, and how great is it to erase the wrinkles, diminish wrinkles, and lose weight at the same time?
Right.
Because here's what happens. You see a lot of the weight loss programs out there, and here's what they do. Your skin, your cells, your skin cells are like bouncy balls. And when they have the nutrition pulled out of them, or if they're dehydrated in any way, they start to deflate. So that's why you see a lot of people that are on these great diets, so to speak, but yet their skin doesn't look good. Their skin doesn't look good. So the idea is to really, and that's why I know a lot of these programs out there, they may just shed the weight quickly for a short period of time, but then you see these patients or you see these people again, and they're saying, oh, it's back on again, and now it's back on with a vengeance. Well, you didn't apply the right principles, you see, because when you have a lot of toxins in the food and you've got all these, again, those skin cells, they're not bouncy anymore, which gives you that robust, beautiful skin and demeanor. That's what you want. You want beautiful demeanor of the skin, and you get that naturally, and you get that through nutrition.
Toxins out, nutrition in.
Hold in.
Give us some strategies around ways you can incorporate beautiful fat into your life. I've seen you, on the Dr. Oz show so many times talking about like fat bombs, and can you share with us some of your favorite ways that you incorporate beautiful fat?
Yeah, so I have to say, my favorite fat of the moment, I love avocado oil. And so there's certain oils that you can turn up and make them hot. You always have to watch the temperature behind fats, as we know. And I love avocado oil because you can turn that temperature up a little bit higher, but actually avocado oil is the only oil that's actually going to build natural collagen in the skin. It's a beautiful buttery oil. I love that, and I drizzle it on just about anything that I can. So when I think about oils and using oils, I like to use them as drizzles, as drizzle oils, because that's when you're going to get the most punch, the most nutrition. You spoke about fat bombs. Fat bombs, I mean, are just fantastic. They are these little balls that you make that they taste like candy almost, and you put all kind of healthy natural fats, and you can put a little monk fruit or a little natural sweetener in there if you'd like, maybe a dab of honey and so forth. And they're just little balls that you eat and you pop in your mouth, and they stabilize your blood sugar, right? They get your blood sugar to where you want it to be, and they're providing your body with all the healthy fats. I mean, really, most foods that we eat, in order to really metabolize and absorb them properly, we need them with fat. Fat is a macronutrient, and it's an important macronutrient that we need. And it's just so important to everything that we do. And when you talk about beauty, you can't talk about beauty and not talk about fats and not talk about healthy fats. I love the idea of fat bombs. I love this whole idea. I mean, anyone who hasn't tried avocado oil, it's a great tip. Have some avocado oil, macadamia nut oil. It's a very buttery, very delicious. We've been talking about coconut. Coconut has been the darling of the decade because we have lost trust in so many fats. Things like margarine, they've come and gone. So we have been looking for the holy grail of fat. So coconut oil kind of slid in there and became the darling of the decade. Fabulous, wonderful, but there are other fats and oils out there that are really fantastic that people should be trying. So avocado oil is what I would recommend everyone to try to slide in there, and that may be the new darling.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I love your glow. I've loved it since the first time I ever met you, and I think you're walking the walk.
Thank you.
You're talking about it. You're teaching us, but all we have to do is take a look at your skin and see the luminosity that's coming from it and know that what you're saying is exactly what our bodies need. So with the fat bombs, what are some of your favorite sort of ingredients to put into them?
Here's the thing, it's kind of like bone broth, and I say you don't have to overthink this. Like when you're making bone broth, all you need to do is you throw those bones in there, put some water over it, and then whatever you like, celery, onions, carrots. I put lemongrass in there just to give it that little extra kick that I like. It's the same thing with fat bombs. You don't even need to overthink it. Maybe some almond butter, maybe some peanut butter, maybe some coconut oil, your favorite oil. You just throw a couple things together and it's absolutely delicious. You pop them in your mouth and they're completely Dr. Kellyann approved.
I love it. When you're doing this scheduled eating or
Yes.
this window, this slim, what do you call it? Slim
Yeah,
window?
I call it the slim window.
Okay, so we're in the slim window,
Yes.
7-8 hours.
Yes.
What are some of the foods that you love to eat during
Yeah.
that period of time?
Well, I have to tell you, it's really very basic. And here's what I want everyone to know, is that there's basic eating, and then there's when you really want to cook and you really want to have fun and you want to add a lot of things. But as busy people and as a routine, you just need to keep it to the basics and how you build a plate. And once you know this, by the way, really, it gets very simple. You just need a little bit of protein. You need carbohydrates and you need fat. So what do I mean by carbohydrates? Because this is what typically trips people up. You have your fibrous carbohydrates and you have your energy carbohydrates. 2 lanes. So when you think about fibrous carbohydrates, that's all the green stuff that we know about. And why is that important? Well, fiber actually is turning out to be really important. It actually even stabilizes your blood sugar, your insulin. It helps with so many different things. And if you picture your intestines, 25 feet of a narrow tube, you can imagine this is where a lot of trouble happens because things don't move through those 25 feet of that narrow tubing. So that's why these greens are really essential. We know about the phytonutrients. We know about the value of all the nutrition in there, but it actually even goes deeper. It's actually like a transport vessel. It gets everything moving through your colon, your intestines. We have to keep that moving. And that's why having greens are really important. And then we look at the energy vegetables. This is where we really get our energy. So if you're someone that likes to work out, or if you're someone that's pregnant and you need more energy, or if you're someone that just typically you're a different kind of oxidizer, you burn a little differently and you say, I need a little bit more carbohydrates. Then you want the denser carbohydrates. This is where things like potatoes or sweet potatoes or squash or all those type of vegetables, that's where they fall. And a really easy way to get energy type of vegetables. I love jicama, that's one of my favorites. Even carrots, onions, they have a little bit more density to them. So they actually give you a higher level of energy. So if you picture your plate again, and we're thinking about protein, your type of protein, and guess what? We need very little protein. This is what, so we talk about paleo and Paleolithic and we talk about all these ketogenic, there's a huge myth that it's a slab of protein.
Right.
Particularly when you're talking about a paleo-based diet. People think, they picture this big slab of, it's not so. You actually need a very little bit to really drive everything that you need it to do and to get the metabolites, to get what you need out of it, you need a little.
So when you say a little protein, you're talking about
It could
3
be
or
2
4
ounces, it could be 3 ounces,
Okay.
it could be depending on the person and their weight and
Right.
so forth, but actually very little. And this has been something I've really been studying a lot about lately.
Yeah.
How much protein do we really need? Digestive enzymes, by the way, are fabulous. It's one of the things I love for people to take because it really does make sure that all of that protein is a used protein. You're using it in the proper way. Enzymes are one of the more important things that I'd love to see people incorporate. It's a really good preventative type of vitamin. I love that. So you've got your protein. You've got your 2 levels of carbohydrates, either your fibrous carbohydrate, your energy carbohydrate, and then of course there's your fat. We talk about fat. That's your plate. And then in terms of fruit, I love berries. Berries are the best kind of fruit you can pick. And here's why I love blueberries so much. They're almost like getting a natural dose of sunscreen because they protect your skin against sun damage. So you see, again, it's a twofer. So it tastes great. It adds just enough sweetener. It's not going to do crazy things to your blood sugar. So it really is very simple. Picture your plate. You've got a little bit of protein, you've got some carbohydrates, and if you can get some kind of salad, rough carbohydrate, raw carbohydrate, and cooked, it's beautiful. I mean, that's the perfect plate. A handful is the serving size of fruit, maybe a handful of some kind of berry. It's a perfect plate. And you really, For people that are listening are saying, oh my God, is she out of her mind? That's like way too much work. Here's the thing about energy. You have a redistribution of energy. When you start really getting healthy and those cells are bouncing and propelling and they're not stuck and they're not tired and they're not dehydrated, you don't have things stuck in your colon, and all of these things start to move and they start to shift. An amazing thing happens, Naomi. You actually get up with a bounce in your step. You get up in the morning and you have a bounce in your step, and you start to sleep better, and all these wonderful things happen. So that's how you build a plate. And I also have to tell you, I am a fan of collagen shakes. Here's why I love collagen. Because a lot of people that I've used many different proteins with, the collagen seems to work really beautifully with people. So I love having some kind of shake. A collagen shake is what I prefer, and throwing some vegetables in there with some good fats. MCT is good, you know, the medium chain triglycerides, or some kind of oil that works great with your body, and maybe a little bit of berries. It's just the perfect meal for so many people. It's delicious. It gets the job done. It's super quick. And a really good trick is you take some vegetables, some greens, just keep them in your freezer. Have them frozen. They're there all of the time. Take them out and throw them in your shake. Take some berries, put those in the freezer. They're always there. Quick, easy, done.
I love it. And collagen shakes, to your point, you don't need as much protein.
You don't.
And you're getting the right kind of protein for your bones, for your joints, for your overall health and well-being, and of course, beauty.
And beauty. I mean,
Yeah.
again, see what you just said. Again, it's being a doctor of the future. It's thinking progressively. We're not just going to do one rote thing and take all this time. No, we're going to get it done, and we're going to get it done fast, and we're going to get it done right.
I love
And
it.
that's why I love collagen. So you're going to get all that healthy, good protein. And guess what? It's really good for the skin. You can't get any better than that.
Dr. Kellyanne, your energy, your mentality of getting 2 for 1, it is so welcoming to
you.
hear that as a woman, because we need these competitive advantages. We need to understand
Love that you
the
said that.
massive information that's out there and keep trailblazing.
Well, you know, I don't know any other way, so I promise you I will. And it's my pleasure to do so.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. It's been a joy.
You know, wait a minute. I have seen her backstage at the Dr. Oz show.
You're right, Montel. She's on Dr. Oz all the time. And I think it's because she has such a powerful way of communicating to millions of people. She's a New York Times bestseller, and she's just a dynamo.
Absolutely. Now, our next guest, another really unbelievable expert, Dr. Frank Lipman.
Yes, Dr. Frank Lipman is a pioneering doctor in the field of integrative medicine. And he has an incredibly busy practice in New York City. He comes from South Africa. So what he's done as a medical doctor is integrate so many different modalities that he is able to heal his patients in a way that is really transformative.
And see, what's transformative about this series is the fact that this information gets to you at home. You know, take a look at this.
Thank you so much for being with me today. This is very exciting. Can you share with us your background, your name, all that you've done?
Sure. I'm Frank Lipman. I finished medical school in South Africa in 1979, a long time ago. And soon after I finished medical school, I realized the shortcomings of Western medicine, because in Western medicine we trained in hospitals, we trained in crisis care. When someone's really sick, they've broken a bone, they have acute appendicitis, they've got acute pneumonia. That's what we get trained in, and Western medicine is wonderful at this crisis care, at this acute care medicine. But as soon as I got into private practice, or I started seeing patients outside of the hospital, they were coming in and they couldn't poop, and they were tired, and they had digestive problems. And I saw and I realized that these patients were not being properly treated by the way I was trained. So I realized very early on that my training in Western medicine was very limited. And it was limited to that crisis care medicine. And we didn't get trained in treating the common problems that people come to you as a doctor day to day. So I realized early on in my training that I'd have to explore other modalities and other ways of treating patients that were coming in to see me.
So when you thought about the patients that were coming in to see you and you weren't satisfied with what you were able to provide to them, What was that feeling inside? What were you looking to achieve? Where were you looking to go?
When you come out of medical school and you're trained in this very powerful model, you think you can treat everything. And then I went into a private practice after I worked in the bush and I worked at a hospital, and I realized I couldn't help these patients. And it just so happened to be in Johannesburg, South Africa at the time, homeopathy was very popular, and there was one acupuncturist. And I was working in this very hip practice where the artsy community were coming, and these people were coming in to see me, and they had said they had been to the acupuncturist and their back pain got better. They took a homeopathic remedy and their headache got better. And I started questioning my training, and I realized that this is interesting. They're helping people that I can't help. I need to start exploring these things. And then when I emigrated to the United States in 1984, and I had to do a residency here to get a license, the same thing happened again. I was working in a hospital, and it was wonderful to see these acutely ill patients helped by Western medicine. But when I went into the outpatient clinic, they weren't being helped. So there happened to be an acupuncture clinic attached to the hospital because it was doing detox acupuncture with needles in people's ears.
Interesting.
So I said, I don't want to be a doctor. This is not what I want to do. I'm going to explore acupuncture. I need to explore other ways of helping people. So early on in 1984, I started going to this acupuncture clinic and exploring acupuncture and Chinese medicine.
And you were looking at acupuncture as a detox? This was specific to detox or general overall health?
The clinic was an acupuncture clinic for detox because that's how the hospital was getting reimbursed by Medicaid, because we were seeing heroin and crack addicts. Heroin and crack were a huge problem in the 1980s in the South Bronx. But at the same time, at the back, they were doing regular acupuncture. So during my residency, I was living two completely different lives. In the hospital, I was learning, acute crisis care medicine, which was wonderful for the patients we were seeing in the hospital. And at the Chinese medicine clinic, we were treating these patients who couldn't poop and had headaches and they were tired. And Chinese medicine was wonderful for these patients. So early on in my career, I saw the future of medicine was combining these two, using Western medicine where it was appropriate and Chinese medicine when it was appropriate.
So you were so far above and beyond your time to be able to look at the two medicines and to feel the need to expand into both. So where did you take it from there? Where did you go?
Well, it was very obvious that we needed a new model, and also coming from South Africa and growing up during apartheid, it was very easy to know that the system was rotten. So I knew, same as the South African political system was rotten, I had the same feeling about the medical system. So I was questioning the medical system all the time, and that was just in my blood, I think, growing up in South Africa. So I was trying to work out how to combine Western medicine and Chinese medicine. And in the late 80s, I met Jeffrey Bland. And Jeffrey Bland, hearing him for the first time, was this huge aha experience for me. Because he had taken the philosophy of Chinese medicine about improving function and creating balance, and taken the Western knowledge of physiology and biochemistry and mixed the two and called this functional medicine. And when I heard him speak, this light went off, because I was struggling to fit these two types of medicines together, because in Chinese medicine they talk about too much wind and too much heat and not enough qi, and so the language was completely different. But Jeff had somehow taken these two sort of worlds and created a system from it. So that to me was a very powerful experience.
And then from there you created your model. And I'm sitting in your daughter's office here, and she's a therapist, which is just a beautiful thing to think of sharing and the work that you do within your family. But your facility, your office is called Be Well.
Right.
What does that mean to you? And I'm so curious about your new book.
Right. Well, my new book is called How to Be Well,
Yes.
because I'm obsessed with wellness, because Western medicine is, as we say, crisis care medicine, it's disease care. It's not a healthcare system. So how do you keep people well? How do you prevent disease? And actually, what we're doing more and more is actually treating a lot of disease that Western medicine isn't helping too, the chronic disease. But I'm obsessed with wellness, and I'm obsessed with the day-to-day things we do in our lives that create wellness, that we never get taught at medical school. I didn't get taught in functional medicine either. Little things like spending 10, 15 minutes meditating, taking a walk barefoot on the beach, sitting around a table with your family or your community, not being isolating, having a community that supports you, listening to music. There's so many little things that affect our health that we ignore, that we just take for granted. So I'm obsessed with how do you teach people to use things that they do naturally in their life and they don't realize that can be healing for them. You know, we live in a big city. People don't realize that taking a walk in the forest or
Right.
amongst trees or taking a walk on the beach can be helpful. You know, we live such busy lives that we don't realize that sitting with your family, with your children, with your community, eating, taking your time eating, that's healing. Cooking food at home, cooking your own food rather than getting pre-cooked food. All these things to me are important because I think they all make a difference and they all add up.
Those are amazing examples and things that I think about all the time. How can I incorporate wellness into my daily life? And a lot of times when we're moving so fast, we're trying to juggle so many things. I'm a mother, I have 4 children. I think about how do I get through all of the things in the day. But then to hear from you this model, your obsession around wellness, of how we can easily interject these activities is truly remarkable and so far above and beyond your time. Wellness is becoming the catchword of today. How many years ago did you become obsessed with wellness?
In the beginning, I was struggling for all of this to make sense. It was only when I started understanding how it all worked together, seeing patients getting better by putting a little bit of music on, getting them to sleep better, getting them to go for a walk, getting them to feel inspired or motivated or passionate about what they do. All these things we take for granted. When I started seeing these results in my practice, I started questioning just listening to what I'd been taught or reading what I'd read in studies. I started realizing there's this whole human condition that we ignore or we don't really take note of that's so important in the healing. So my new book, How to Be Well, is to show people that's not that difficult. You know, most people, let's say that they don't want to eat gluten. You know, if you just show people this is what you do, it's really not that difficult. The premise of the book is to make it easy for people. People don't really want to know, you know, the exact reasons why anymore. They just want to know how to do it. So I'm obsessed with trying to make it easy for people, because when it's easy, then people will do it. When it becomes a habit, then people will do it. You know, meditation, people think is very difficult, but if you make a commitment to sit every morning for your 10, 15, 20 minutes, and you do it every day, and it then becomes a habit, you feel the difference. So how do you create habits from these daily rituals that we should be doing normally?
How do you create habits from the daily rituals? And that makes a lot of sense when you think about having to take a ritual that is we have so many rituals that we engage in throughout the day, and then you inject just this small change to that ritual, that activity, and that creates a sense of wellness and improves our state of wellness.
Yeah, I think for most people, what I've learned over the years is you've got to make someone feel better quickly. If people have the subjective experience of wellness and you can get them to feel that, then you've got them hooked. They don't have to listen to you. If you can make someone feel vital and alive and they lose some weight and their skin gets better, if you can make them feel like that fairly quickly, then you've got them hooked. So the catch is, how do you get people to actually have that subjective experience of feeling well, and then they'll listen to their bodies.
So you're a leader in medicine, you're a leader in wellness, you've probably coined the word. And what are the secrets? What are the ways that somebody like me can quickly start to feel better? What are the couple of things that you would recommend?
Right, so I have these 6 parameters that I talk about in my book. You need to learn how to eat, how to sleep, how to move, how to unwind, how to protect yourself because we have so many chemicals, and how to connect. And how to connect with yourself, with your family, with your community, with the earth. So those are my 6 parameters: eating, sleeping, moving, unwinding, protecting, and connecting. Simple.
Can you talk about unwinding? Because that's probably one where we spend the least amount of time.
Well, I think we live in a culture where we on the go all the time. We have all our machines. Everyone is so stressed out. What we call from a medical perspective, there's too much sympathetic nervous system activity. So the perfect antidote to that is meditation, because meditation stimulates your parasympathetic nervous system. So wouldn't it be wonderful if everyone learned meditation in school and that just became part of their lives? It would solve a lot of problems. But a lot of people aren't going to just meditate. So how else can you create that parasympathetic effect in the body, or the opposite effect of stress? You can listen to music. Bob Marley or reggae music, for instance, the beat is at approximately 60 beats per minute, which is the rate of a slow heart rate. So if you just put on Bob Marley and listen, you actually automatically slow down. If you go sit at the beach and listen to the waves, you automatically slow down. There's so many little things that one can do to just get your body to relax. And that's what the book is about, is to show people it's not that difficult. And actually meditation, which we have this idea you have to sit on a cushion and chant Om, not necessarily. You learn how to breathe. You need to learn to get out of your head. So there are many different techniques and many different ways to unwind. The beauty of unwinding is it doesn't cost anything. You don't have to go anywhere. You can do it in your own home, in your own time, and it's free. All you really need to do is sit quietly with yourself and focus on your breath. Now, Eastern traditions have taught that for millennia. That is a staple of all the Eastern traditions, breathing techniques, and then getting into meditation or whatever. You can do that in your home. You can do that right now, sitting on your chair, feeling your butt on the chair, slowing down and breathing. Makes a huge difference.
And when you say about upregulating your parasympathetic nervous system, when we understand, we don't need to know the why and the how, but just the simple activity that we can do for free, that we can do in our home with this kind of guidance is so, it really inspires us to add into a ritual, whatever it may be, these extra few minutes. You're sitting at the office, you're working. Take a few minutes to do that breathing, like what you're saying.
Exactly.
So how do you apply this to diet? What are your thoughts around diet?
Well, my thoughts around diet are pretty straightforward. There's no one right diet for everyone.
Okay.
Having said that, the vast majority of people in this day and age probably do best on a low carbohydrate diet. Now, why is that? There is an epidemic of diabetes and pre-diabetes, or what I call carbohydrate intolerance. And especially as you get older, your capacity to metabolize carbohydrates decreases. And we have so many carbohydrates in our diet today because we still believe this crazy myth that fat is bad for you.
So fat is not bad for you?
Fat is good for you. Good fats. Fat made by God are good for you. Fats made by man are probably not good for you. Carbohydrates are more of a problem than fats. Now here's a caveat. If you're eating a high-fat diet, you need to eat a low-carb diet, because having a high-carb diet with a high-fat diet, not good. But for the most part, if you're eating a low-carb diet, fats are good for you. I became pre-diabetic because I was this doctor promoting a diet full of grains, and I used to eat tons of fruit. So I was eating a diet. I wasn't eating meat. I thought being a pescatarian was healthy. So I was eating a diet, some fish, lots of grains, lots of fruits and vegetables, and I thought that was healthy, and I became pre-diabetic. And only when I cut out the grains and I cut way back on the carbs and I started not being scared of fat, because most people think fat, you think fat, they're clogging up your arteries. And only when I got over that fear and I started eating lots of almond butter and avocado and coconut oil and coconut milk and grass-fed meat, and not being scared of these things, and lots of eggs, my weight automatically dropped. I felt much better and my blood sugars came down. So we have this myth that American society, American Medical Association, the government all bought into this low-fat nonsense. In 1955, physiologist Ansel Keys came out with this hypothesis, mind you.
Right.
There was no research, not good research, this hypothesis that there was a connection between your fat, with the fat you ate, and heart disease. And everyone bought into it. And over the years, there have been more and more studies showing that that's not the case. There's actually a correlation with low-fat eating and lower mortality. So you die earlier when you eat less fat. So it's important to eat healthy fats, not the trans fats, not the vegetable oils that people cook with. And that includes canola oil. Canola oil, there's this myth that canola oil is healthy.
Right.
It's not a healthy, if you want to heat your oils, you use sometimes olive oil, but preferably avocado oil or coconut or butter or ghee. These are better to cook with. So I think, unfortunately, we eat so many unhealthy fats that fats have got a bad rap. But if you avoid the trans fats and the heated vegetable oils, and you're eating natural fats made by God, fats are not a problem.
And so you changed your own health by recognizing that what you had been avoiding was actually what was going to heal you. How did you come to that moment?
It was very difficult.
Yeah.
Because I had to see a blood test which showed me that my blood sugar I was almost diabetic. I was pre-diabetic. And I thought, this is strange. I'm eating healthily.
Right.
This can't be right. And then I started doing more and more research and reading up about it. And I realized that what I'm doing is I am carbohydrate intolerant, like I'd say 2/3 of my patients. I'm eating too many carbohydrates for what my body can metabolize, and I need to cut back on that. And as soon as I did that, as I said, I wasn't even trying to lose weight. I automatically lost weight. My health got better. My numbers came down. And it was very difficult in the beginning until I felt so much better, and I couldn't go against the way I was feeling and what my numbers looked like. And then I started using in my practice and seeing the same thing was happening to my patients. So I haven't turned back.
It's remarkable. When did you start this process?
This is probably 10 years ago.
Wow.
Look, I, like everybody else, believed every time I saw fat that when I ate that fat, I was clogging up my arteries.
Yeah. It's incredible to think, as a doctor who has brought together Western and Eastern and been willing to really look at the numbers. Like you said, you got the blood test and you looked at the numbers and you transformed your own health. And that discovery for yourself and what you're sharing in your book of how to be well is something that every single person in this country and beyond can learn from.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Let every single person get how to be well.
But every single person, if you think about the simple steps that we can take and the obsession that we have with getting more well, it can change our whole world.
Absolutely.
Right?
And we need to. We have major epidemics of diabetes, heart disease, obesity, Alzheimer's. Most of these are from poor eating. And most of the poor eating is because of too many carbohydrates and bad fats.
Yeah.
But, we unfortunately in our culture, it's very difficult to be well and stay well because all the default choices are unhealthy for the most part. There's a drug dealer on every corner, I say.
Yeah.
You go to the 7-Eleven, it's like a drug dealer. It's all the candy, all the sugar, all the crap, all the junk food there. So we have drug dealers on every corner. So you've got to be strong, you've got to be motivated, and you've got to know what to do.
Thank you so much for sharing how to be well. I've learned a lot, and I think that for all the busy people that are running around this office, and we've heard a lot of them, it's transformative.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for making a documentary like this.
It's my pleasure and my joy.
Thank you.
See, I love this guy, and again, because he breaks down the information in a way that makes it accessible to all of us.
Yeah, he himself chose to make all of these changes in his own life, and once he embodied that, he then was able to have such an impact on so many people.
And again, that has been honestly not necessarily the theme that we were trying to put out when you did the series, but almost every single doctor Every single expert is walking the walk. They live this way, and that's what's so important about getting the information like this to you. You know, I'm so really excited about the fact that you've mixed up throughout this entire series all the experts that we're talking to. Ben Greenfield, known author, radio personality, but he's a person who walks the walk, right?
Yes, Ben Greenfield is an incredibly interesting guy. This guy is a Spartan racer. He's a world-class athlete. He brings the most interesting biohacking information to all the thought leaders. He's like a thought leader of the thought leaders.
And see, when you say terms like biohacking, people at home are going, what does she mean by that? Take a look, she'll explain it.
Ben Greenfield, it's so exciting to have you here. Thank you for making the time.
Thanks for having me.
So you talk about a lot of things, and I'm fascinated to learn what got you into this place where you're obsessed with health, you're obsessed with biohacking your own biology. When did this all begin?
My story is really boring. I was never morbidly obese. I never had a horrible chronic disease. Like I have just always loved studying and deciphering and decoding the human body and brain. And from an early age was, wandering the hill. I was homeschooled, right? So I would just I would get done with school at 11 a.m. just go wander the hills, barefoot, hiking around, catching animals and finding plants and fitnessing and running up hills. And I really wasn't into athletics or sports so much until high school when I discovered that girls like guys who play sports, not necessarily guys who walk around barefoot with their bow and arrow and their dog out in the woods. So I really began developing a love for tennis. And when I played tennis, I wound up going to college to play tennis, and as a student athlete does, declared my major as exercise physiology. And so I studied exercise physiology for 4 years. I got a master's degree in biomechanics and exercise physiology. I kind of stayed with fitness, and I began to manage gyms and open personal training studios. And what I really focused on was how to get the body you want, how to achieve the performance that you want, and how to fix the issues that you have when nothing else seems to be working, right? So, for example, I had all of my gyms and studios equipped with things like high-speed 3D video cameras to be able to analyze things like running gait, walking gait, cycling mechanics, things where people develop chronic repetitive injuries. Calorimetry equipment, where you can measure, for example, how much fat you're burning and how many carbohydrates you're burning at various exercise intensities, or just how many calories you're burning at rest. So you can really tweak and customize your diet. And I was doing a lot of blood and biomarker testing before it became popular and, frankly, far easier to do, far more accessible, really. We live in a day and age where you can easily do that from your home. Back then I was, pulling the bloods and sending them off to docs and sending them back to labs and waiting a few weeks for the results and really customizing people's diets based on that. Was even partnering with a lot of physicians. We would do things like platelet-rich plasma injections in joints that were sore and EKG analysis of cardiac potential for exercise. So I was doing a lot of very nerdy things back in the day as a personal trainer. I was kind of an atypical personal trainer. And really that's the way I've always been wired, though. I like to take a deep dive into the details, and frankly have found that that's important because in many cases, especially when it comes to something like fat loss or getting the body that you want, it's not as simple as many people would have you to believe. And what I mean by that is you can't just go out and do a CrossFit workout every day and necessarily expect to get the results that you want, or go on a special diet and get the results that you want. It's very multimodal, multifactorial, and there's a variety of reasons people are resistant to weight loss.
It's really interesting what you just said. It's not as easy as we might think. And we look at our country, and the majority of people are either overweight or obese. Diabetes is at, 50%? There's so many crazy statistics, and they're not going in the right direction. What are we doing wrong?
You know what? I think the number one thing that goes wrong when it comes to fat loss, and you could say the same thing about health in general, but especially like body composition.
Yes.
It's that we see the headlines like eggs are bad for you, eggs are good for you. The low carb, high fat diet gives you heart disease. The low carb, high fat diet saves your heart. Low intensity, steady state cardio before breakfast is the best way to lose fat. Saving your hard workout for the end of the day is the best way to lose fat. And it confuses people, and it's understandable, but the reason that it confuses people is because the truth is everybody's wired differently, right? My blood, my biomarkers, my genetic predispositions to respond to certain exercises, my nutrient deficiencies, everything is different from person to person. And so what works for you might not work for me, and vice versa. And we now live in an era where we have at our hands the ability to be able to do DNA testing and blood testing and micronutrient testing and calorimetry testing and all of these ways that you can actually find out what is going to work for you. So I think one of the problems is that people are looking for a one-size-fits-all solution, and it does not exist. And if you customize something like a weight loss program to yourself, then you actually get the results that you want.
So for someone who's listening to you, watching what you're saying right now, they're not necessarily going to go to their doctor and get their different biomarkers tested and so forth. How do we customize in this very confusing environment in a way that's easy and you just sort of get a chance to move down the right path?
Right. Let's say diet, for example. We want to customize diet. Well, I would argue that in most cases, when it comes to genetic testing, not only has it dropped from tens of thousands of dollars to thousands of dollars to hundreds of dollars to something like $97 now, but it's getting even cheaper.
Yeah.
I'm talking to some companies right now that are making genetic testing available in the next year for about $10.
Wow.
Right. So you can get a salivary analysis. You drip a little saliva into a tube. I do this all the time. And I sniff a little peanut butter to make the saliva flow. That's the trick that works for me.
That's the trick I was
wondering.
That's
the trick. And you can get, for example, your DNA tested. We know from studies that there are certain micronutrient deficiencies associated with obesity or propensity to gain weight. We have biotin, coenzyme Q10, vitamin D. There's a cluster of factors. I mean, there are dozens of services right now where you can literally just go online, order a test kit to your home, or order what is called a requisition form that you then take into a lab. You don't have to make a doctor's appointment. You can just do all this from the comfort of your own home. Companies like Inside Tracker or Thorne or Wellness FX, or there are even gut testing companies like Viome and Thrive, and so you could learn how to do it in an hour online. You get a nice PDF sent to you. You can start to go through those results. But that's the type of thing that a lot of times people need to do. I mean, I'm a fan of self-quantification, of data, of figuring out what's going to work for you and your body, and then acting accordingly.
I like that a lot. I remember when I did Inside Tracker, it was so easy. They came to my house, they took my blood, they sent me all of the information online, and I could see, what my biological age was versus my chronological age, and then get texts throughout the day to remind me, okay, make sure you're eating the nuts or you're doing this, to look at the micro deficiencies and so forth. It's very easy.
Don't get me wrong. There are universal principles that apply.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Let's say, for example, something that not a lot of people are talking about, in my opinion, or not enough people are talking about. This concept of glycemic variability, right? How often does your blood glucose fluctuate during the day? Not only is that because blood glucose fluctuations have a profound effect on how many of those glucose molecules get shoved into fat tissue, but it also has a profound effect on inflammation, on chronic disease risk factors. I mean, if you could control your blood sugar, in my opinion, in addition to controlling inflammation, that's one of the best things that you can do for general health and for fat loss. How can you limit the number of times that your blood sugar rises during the day? How many fluctuations that you experience? Lowering glycemic variability is not rocket science.
Right.
For example, many cultures, and especially many of these blue zones, right, areas where there's a large number of long-lived people, Okinawa, Sardinia, Loma Linda, there's a variety of locations. We see the use of things like digestifs, bitters, things that are consumed before a meal to enhance digestion. This might be fennel, it might be licorice, lemon, apple cider vinegar, in some cases little alcohols, that little shot of grappa or vinsanto that you might have in Italy. These actually work to enhance what is called your first phase insulin response, which is what your body actually needs to naturally produce to lower your blood glucose response to a meal. So by consuming, let's say, a glass of water with a little lemon and apple cider vinegar before a meal, and maybe sautéing your steak with a little bit of fennel seed on it, like that's the type of thing that would be considered something that would lower your glycemic response, the ability of your blood sugar to rise in response to that meal, which can have a profound effect on weight loss. Chewing every bite that you eat, literally like 25 to 40 times.
Yes.
Actually chewing,
Also, my grandmother
slowing
was
down.
right.
Exactly. Chew your liquids,
Yes.
drink your solids, something like that. I'm probably messing that up, but ultimately you have to process the food in your mouth where you begin to produce a lot of digestive enzymes that enhance, it's called an incretin response, or that first phase insulin response that I referred to. You're producing all of the digestive hormones responsible for not just digesting that meal, but for lowering the blood glucose response to that meal.
I just remember when I was in Okinawa with all of the, the large group of long-living centenarians and so forth, and the way they would make their salads were completely different than the way we would eat them here, and it's just like they're chocked full of different spices and herbs. So you'd be eating like a herb salad instead of a lettuce salad, and
Bitter,
that had a huge, just like what you were saying with the bitters.
Herbaceous type of compounds that many of us don't cook with. And the fact is that we go way beyond fat loss. We go into longevity with a lot of these type of compounds because these wild plants are chock full of natural built-in defense mechanisms that actually attack our body a little bit. And by consuming those, we actually enhance our body's ability to produce its own what we call endogenous antioxidants. There are our built-in defense mechanisms against those compounds that we're consuming. Things like Ceylon cinnamon, apple cider vinegar, bitter melon extract, all of these type of things when consumed prior to a meal lower the blood glucose response to that meal. And you can weave these throughout your day, right?
Absolutely.
You can have a shot of apple cider vinegar with lemon, like I mentioned before dinner. You could maybe get some bitter melon extract and use that before lunch. Put some Ceylon cinnamon and like some breakfast yogurt or a breakfast smoothie or in some tea. And it goes beyond just dietary strategies as well when it comes to glycemic variability. For example, you can upregulate the ability of the specific transporters. They're called GLUT4 transporters. These can actually transport sugars and glucose into muscle. And an example of how you would upregulate those would be to do some type of strength training before you actually eat. And it doesn't have to be a lot.
When before you're eating is what you're saying?
Before you eat. It can be 2 minutes. 2 minutes of like for me, I have a long driveway, right? And I have lunch every day.
Yes.
I have my big salad for lunch, and I put a bunch of sardines and nuts and all sorts of stuff on there. But you still get a glucose response to that.
Yeah.
So I wait to check my mail box at the end of that driveway before lunch. I walk down and then I sprint up. Right, it's that simple. You can keep a kettlebell underneath your cubicle at the office and do like 2 minutes of kettlebell swings before you break for lunch. Very, very simple way to upregulate the activity of those glucose transporters. And the same thing could be said for lower intensity aerobic exercise. They found that things like what they would call a postprandial walk, just going for a walk for 15 minutes after you eat a meal, has been shown to have a profound effect on your blood glucose response to that meal.
And when you talk about postprandial, that's the time when our body is digesting and in that
Postprandial,
state.
after eating.
Exactly.
Yep. Exactly. So chewing your food, using bitters, strength training, doing easy aerobics after a meal, all of these things to reduce glycemic variability have a profound effect on fat loss because the fewer amounts of blood glucose fluctuations you get during the day, the more sensitive you remain to the hormone insulin. And that would mean you need less insulin to be able to shove a lot of energy into liver, into muscle. And when that happens, you're much less likely to have a lot of insulin floating around, it's a storage hormone. It's not a bad hormone, but it's a storage hormone. Too much glucose, too much insulin, too many calories around, and you end up creating fat cells or shoving that energy into fat cells. So this concept of controlling glycemic variability, regardless of what kind of custom diet you're doing for you, is a principle, right? Whether you're doing high fat, low carb, low fat, whatever you've found to work well for you, controlling blood glucose fluctuations is key.
I love it. How would you recommend people getting into a place where they can control theirs? I understand clearly what you're saying as far as the steps, but how do they test? What is the best way to go about checking it throughout the day?
In my opinion, two pretty simple ways to test how well you're doing at controlling blood glucose. And this is like, I used to be a bodybuilder, right? And I would track all my food, how many calories in the banana and the avocado and the, can and a half of tuna fish to the T, like spreadsheets, everything. And I did a few years ago the same thing with sleep, right? Like I'd sleep and I'd analyze my sleep cycles, how much deep sleep, how much light sleep, how much sleep latency, how long does it take you to fall asleep. And you'll find after you've tracked for a little while, especially if you live a lifestyle where you have some routine, some habits, you begin to become pretty familiar and you can kind of stop testing, you can stop tracking. So I'm not a fan of sucking all the enjoyment out of food because you go and track your blood glucose values after your trip to your favorite restaurant to see what happens when you eat your favorite meal at your favorite restaurant. But for a short period of time, it can be effective. So for example, you could go to Walgreens or CVS or any pharmacy and buy for $20 a blood glucose monitor. And you can actually, just prick your finger, you bleed a little bit, and you find out what your postprandial blood glucose is. And if you're seeing that it rises or stays high for a very long period of time after a meal, that would be a sign that that meal is raising blood glucose. If you're needle phobic, there are tests that can kind of approximate that, like a big rise in heart rate after a meal. There's a test called a COCA pulse test, COCA, a COCA pulse test, which is a good way to gauge, how much a meal is amping you up, how much of a blood glucose response you get to that meal. It can also be used for things like food sensitivities, for example. Another simple way to measure would be, let's say you're going to test your blood once a year or twice a year, like do an actual blood panel. There's a measurement called hemoglobin A1C, HbA1c, and that's a 3-month snapshot of what your blood glucose is doing. It tests a red blood cell corollary to blood glucose. The only people that's not accurate for are hard-charging athletes who tend to have a high red blood cell turnover, but it's good for the average person to be able to track. And I'll even know this. I'll test my clients. I'll kind of know if they're cheating because I can see, they're like, I haven't been eating carbohydrates. I mean, their hemoglobin A1c is through the roof. Your fasted glucose is really high. Something's going on. Granted, sometimes things like high cortisol and stress and inflammation can bump up blood glucose, but food and food strategies are really one of the more common things. And some people will get these 24-hour, there are companies like Dexcom, for example, making, devices like a G5, I believe it's called, which is literally just like monitoring blood glucose 24/7. And there are several tech companies right now developing infrared technology, needleless technology, where you can just track blood glucose and a variety of other parameters, lactic acid and sodium and all these other things that would allow you, even without needles, to just kind of track all the time.
Is it on the market or not yet?
None of those are on the market yet, but it's technology that I would say within the next year it's probably going to be available.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So if someone wanted to tomorrow start this process of sort of tracking, what would they do when they wake up? Can you just walk us through like what you would do with one of your clients over a 24-hour period, let's say?
Very simple. You get up, you test your fasting blood glucose. I like to frankly see that anywhere between 70 and 90.
Okay.
You get some of these like heavy ketogenic people who will drop like into the 60. You don't have to go that deep, but below 90 is pretty good. You eat a meal, you'll see it rise. You'll see it go 100, 110, 120. Let's say you're going to test it after breakfast. So you've tested fasted when you've gotten up, you test it after breakfast, and if you see it stay elevated for a long period of time, I mean, if it's elevated for 60 minutes and then a couple hours after a meal, it's a pretty good sign that that meal is spiking your blood sugar. Intuitively, if you're having Wheaties and a giant sugary juice for breakfast, you probably know it's going to rise anyways. But ultimately, you're watching what it does. You're watching how steep that blood glucose rises in response to a meal. I don't like it to get much higher than 120.
Yeah.
And you do the same thing, rinse, wash, and repeat. After lunch, test your blood glucose. After dinner, test your blood glucose. There are companies now that also make ketone monitors. And so if you're really trying to control blood glucose or trying to increase fat burning efficiency, you can do like breath tests for ketones, which are essentially a byproduct of fatty acid metabolism, which can also be a good indicator of how much fat that you're burning. The only problem with that strategy is now there's all these supplement companies doing like exogenous ketones and ketogenic supplements. So it is theoretically possible now in our day and age, like ancestral man, if they were burning a lot of fats and not having a lot of glucose fluctuations and their ketones were high, it was because they were calorie deprived or they weren't accessing a lot of carbohydrates. Now it's possible to have like a nice little morning smoothie chock full of ketones and then go have a bagel and have high ketones and high blood glucose. So you got to kind of be careful and know what you're doing. But ultimately, it's very, very, very simple. You know, a $20 blood glucose monitor you can get from Walgreens, and the strips that come with it are pennies on the dollar, and you can easily test throughout the day.
How quickly do you see transformation with some of your clients?
Oh, you can see blood glucose stabilization occur within a couple of weeks.
Amazing.
And that 2-week time frame is kind of like the time frame. 10 to 14 days is where the body gets, people call this like low carb flu, keto flu, but basically your body is learning how to rely on something other than large fluctuations in blood glucose as a fuel. Same thing as if you were to give up coffee and switch to decaf or switch to a decaffeinated tea for a while. You get some headaches and you get some energy deficits, and then eventually you get through the other side and your body does okay with that. So 10 to 14 days before you really start to see a difference in terms of your body's ability to be able to tap into fats as a fuel. For an athlete or somebody who's trying to get off of, let's say, a lot of energy bars, a lot of smoothies, a lot of juices, a lot of very carbohydrate-rich beverages or carbohydrate-rich bars or supplements, it can take 6 months to 2 years to really get yourself to the point. Because if you think about it, if you've been eating cereal and scones and biscotti and high carbohydrates for a very long time, for years, since you were 3 years old, you can't like switch to a low-carb diet and expect to be operating like a rock star within a couple of weeks. Right.
Let's talk about that operating like a rock star. Like for me, I grew up in Europe, so being French, we eat a lot of croissants and chocolate and all of that sort of stuff in the morning. And so when it just basically crashed my body as a CEO, I couldn't keep up with the fluctuation. I started to really deeply embrace balancing out that sugar and transformed my personal life. So there's a lot of misconception about transforming from burning glucose into burning fat. And part of that misconception has to do with like, what is a fat cell? How do we activate burning? And can you share with us some of the insights around fat cells, how we work with them, how we remove the toxins, all of that?
So for a long time, there was this prevailing notion in exercise and nutrition that you can't kill fat cells. You can't get rid of them. They're just there, those evil little fat cells, their tiny claws just like waiting for you to overeat at some point, at which point you get a whole bunch of that extra caloric load shoved into fat tissue, shoved into white adipose tissue or subcutaneous fat or visceral fat or wherever your body tends to store fat. The fact is you can actually convert fat cells into other cells. You can kill fat cells. You just have to be in a proper metabolic state in order to do so. For example, absence of inflammation is one of the key factors that's necessary for you to actually convert fat cells into other cells or for fat cells to actually die. Absence of inflammation is something that you can tackle via a wide variety of strategies. For example, adequate sleep, mitigating stress, lowering cortisol, limiting your exposure to toxins or to what would the huge variety of non-native assailants that come after our body these days, from like excessive Wi-Fi signals, which affects what are called your calcium-gated channels on your cell membranes. That can affect inflammation, your ability to remove like metabolic waste out of tissue. The parabens and phthalates and chemicals that we see storing a lot of fat, creating inflammation. Lifestyle strategies to clean up the body. I look at things like air, right? Begin to be cognizant of the air that you're breathing. Are you using a HEPA air filter in your home? Are you cleaning the air, or is it full of mold and fungi and off-gassing chemicals and things that your body, frankly, has to create fat cells to store? Light. Light can actually be inflammatory. Heavy exposure to large amounts of fluorescent light, large amounts of blue light at night, right? We're constantly bombarded with light from monitors and screens. This is another thing to mitigate and to be careful of. And there's people using blue light blocking glasses and screen protective software and all sorts of things to limit these strategies. At my house, we do a lot of lighting with like red and with candlelight and with fire and with like the things that ancient man or women would have used.
Even lutein is really good for blue light.
Right, exactly.
Egg yolks or spinach.
Yeah, eating a large amount of things like lutein and zeaxanthin from kale, eggs, spinach, fish. This can help to combat some of the effects, the damaging effects that heavy amounts of blue light can have on the retina, for example. So you look at air, you look at light. Water is another biggie, right? Like, are you drinking enough plastic water bottles? Are you filtering your water? Are you using a really good form of filtration, like, say, reverse osmosis? Are you adding minerals to your water? There was even some research, like at the University of Washington, about like structuring your water and ensuring that it has an adequate electrical charge. And then, like I mentioned, electricity, right? Like how much Bluetooth exposure, how much Wi-Fi exposure. Are you turning off your Wi-Fi router at night? Are you putting your phone in airplane mode when it's in your pocket? These are actually almost like invisible variables that affect inflammation and therefore affect fat loss. Am I saying that by turning off your Wi-Fi router, then laying around on the couch all day with a bag of Cheetos, you're going to lose fat? Probably not. But if you're beginning to eat healthy and you're beginning to move, some of these things that decrease inflammation, good air, good water, good light, good electricity, controlling stress, getting adequate sleep, these are all variables that affect inflammation. One of the more potent strategies that I really like and personally use, I used this back when I used to race Ironman triathlon to stay lean, to be able to ride my bike up those hills, improve my power to weight ratio. Because I used to be like 40 pounds heavier than I am now. I was a bodybuilder, right? So I had to actually get rid of a lot of muscle in my case, but the principles are similar. I would use what's called cold thermogenesis, right? Like a lot of cold showers, cold soaks, getting the body cold. And the reason for that is because the presence of cold not only activates a lot of the hormones like irisin and adiponectin that allow for fat cells to release more fatty acids into the bloodstream, but it also converts white adipose tissue into brown fat, into brown adipose tissue, or what we call BAT tissue. And brown adipose tissue is very metabolically active. It's not as inflammatory as white adipose tissue. It burns calories to generate heat, to keep you warm, to shiver, and to do all these positive things that brown fat does for you. It's a very, very kind of cool, harmless, and almost like a tight form of fat. You see, like swimmers have a lot of brown fat.
Yeah,
for
or
example.
babies. Babies are born because they can't shiver.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's interesting also with brown fat. Like we think, okay, we have so much white fat, adipose tissue, but ultimately with brown fat, we only have a couple of ounces in our body, right? And it's sort of in the neck, and
you find it a lot in the collarbone. There's some above the waist, a lot of times like in the upper body and the shoulders. And that conversion of white adipose tissue into brown adipose tissue is not going to occur if you're in an inflamed state. So if you're like taking cold showers, doing like the Wim Hof thing, or cold soaks, that stuff works, but you also have to keep your Wi-Fi router off and make sure that your cologne or your perfume doesn't have a bunch of toxins in it, and you're getting adequate sleep, and you're using anti-inflammatory herbs and spices like curcumin and ginger and garlic and tart cherry and a lot of these things that naturally fight inflammation, and you're avoiding a lot of the things that produce inflammation like sugar is a big one, but really vegetable oil and oxidized fats, in my opinion, are an even bigger culprit when it comes to inflammation, because your body can actually burn sugar, but when it comes to oils, like you are what you eat. Like those will actually be used to make up your cell membranes, and that contributes to even more inflammation. And so the idea here is that if you're using a strategy, like let's say, this is one of my favorite strategies. You get up in the morning, you're fasted, so your body's going to tap into a lot of fats when you're in that fasted state, because you don't have a bunch of extra fats or calories on board to burn, right? So you don't do the big like fatty coffee thing. You don't do like a bunch of snacks. I've encouraged people to avoid much supplementation aside from like a little bit of caffeine or green tea, because that can enhance the ability to be able to release fatty acids from fat tissue. So you get up and you're fasted. Maybe you haven't eaten, I like a 12-hour to 16-hour fast. So you finish dinner at 8 p.m. and you are not going to eat again until like sometime between 8 a.m. and noon, right? I'm very competitive with myself. I even have like a little stopwatch that will start. Okay, when it hits 12 hours, I eat again. And if I get up at midnight for a snack, guess what? I'm not going to eat till lunch. But when you're in that fasted state, there's a few things that work very well. First of all, some type of cardiovascular exercise in your fat burning zone. I mentioned I used to run all these personal training gyms and studios where we do what was called indirect calorimetry, where you can measure how much fat and how much carbohydrate that people burn at rest and during exercise. And you reach a certain point during exercise at which you're burning a very high percentage of fat related to carbohydrates. It might not be the intensity of exercise at which you're burning the most calories, but it's the intensity of exercise that actually kind of trains your body how to be a fat burning machine. High intensity interval training is good. It jacks up your metabolism. Weight training is good. It enhances your glucose sensitivity and adds muscle to, again, increase your metabolism. But you also need a little bit of this kind of like steady state, easy aerobic conversational exercise to train your body how to be a fat burning machine. And I like to encourage people to do this when they're in a fasted state in the morning, right? So you got a lot of your own fat to tap into. So you wake up fasted, get a little caffeine in your system, do like easy cardio for 20 to 60 minutes. Then you finish up with the cold, right? You do like a cold shower or a cold soak or a cold bath. And The other thing that happens when you do this, and I see this a lot in people who like charge out of bed at 4 a.m. for their Navy SEAL CrossFit, like hardcore workout. The fact is that after you do a workout like that, you tend to get really hungry for breakfast and you tend to create a lot of cortisol. And that can sometimes come back to bite you. You engage in like a hypercaloric intake after a hard morning workout.
All the time.
You get a lot of cortisol, and you also tend to sit around a lot more during the day because you're patting yourself on the back that you did such a hard workout. You can just kind of sit down the rest of the day. Whereas I like the idea of just like getting up, walking the dog in the sunshine while you're fasted, or going for an easy swim, or doing some easy yoga or stretching, and then you save all the hard stuff for later on in the day. Which works really well because that's when your body temperature peaks, that's when your grip strength peaks, that's when your ability to repair muscles after exercise peaks. We see a second hormonal peak later in the afternoon. And so that's exactly what I do, is I do very, very easy in the morning, coffee, cold shower, and then later on in the afternoon or the early evening, I'll actually do the hard workout, the higher intensity workout. Now, the other cool thing about this strategy is that if you're an athlete or if you exercise a lot, one of the limitations of really restricting glycemic variability, like I was talking about, by not eating a lot of carbohydrates or eating a lower carbohydrate intake, you don't have a lot of energy for the next day's workout sometimes.
Right.
It's tough to go hard. So what I do is I actually eat good carbohydrates, like either longevity-enhancing carbohydrates like blueberries or red wine or dark chocolate, what I call safe starches, right, like yams and sweet potatoes and tubers or quinoa or amaranth or millet or my wife's wonderful slow-fermented sourdough bread.
Ooh.
Like I'll eat these things in the evening, but because I've done a harder high-intensity workout at some point in the afternoon, those GLUT4 transporters that I was talking about, they're very active, they're very ready.
Right.
So those carbohydrates that I eat, they get shoved into liver tissue, they get shoved into muscle tissue, and they get socked away for energy for the next day's workout. You don't see a big rise in blood glucose for people doing
The
like
following morning.
Right, exactly. People doing like ketosis, you know, you're kind of like back in that fat
Yeah.
burning mode by the next day. And so this whole strategy of like morning easy workout, caffeinated state, cold shower, and then doing the harder stuff in the afternoon works really well. And the only other strategy that I really like...
Just to stay on that one. So I love what you're saying. You're telling us like exactly where the research is going, which is like, look, we don't have to deprive ourselves. We can have our carbohydrates, but the timing is what really matters. It's like you're talking about timing our carbs for later on in the day, having the high quality carbs, pre-gaming, you know, in the morning with caffeine. And I love the part about being able to get into a cold shower. Can you talk to us a little bit about how long that shower should be to really get the health benefits?
So when it comes to the cold shower,
yes,
there's a lot of kind of research that goes back and forth on it, you know, in terms of, do you have to get to a shivering state? Do you have to get super cold? Do you have to stay in there 20 minutes? Several years ago, I met Ray Cronice, a former NASA materials engineer who was doing a lot of studying on cold thermogenesis. And the strategy that he uses and that he's found in his lab to be very effective is a 5-minute cold shower twice a day, in which you alternate between 20 seconds of cold and 10 seconds of hot. So you're contrasting, going back and forth. So you get this big release of blood flow, you get a release of what's called nitric oxide, you get a bump in metabolism, and it also makes the cold shower a little easier because you get to go back to hot every now and again. There's another guy who has developed like a vest. It's like an ice vest that you wear. It's called the Cool Fat Burner, and he has another one called the Cool Gut Buster. And these are like pieces of gear that you wear like while you're working during the day. And he's done research on what happens when you get to a state of shivering, and he's seen up to a 300% increase in metabolic rate once you get up to the point where you're shivering. Now, is that a little less convenient and maybe a little more uncomfortable? Absolutely. But it appears that if you really want to get the most effects, you kind of have to get into almost like this hardcore kind of intense shivering mode. Now, what I do is I do a little bit of both. So I do that cold shower or that cold soak, and sometimes I only go for 2 minutes, right? Like sometimes I don't have the time to take a 5-minute shower, right? But I'll do that a couple times a day. Right, so like after that morning workout that I talked about, and then if I do something hard in the evening, I'll do it after that hard evening workout. And that's cool because you also, cool, pun intended, it's cool because you get that double whammy, you like cold exposure twice during the day, but you also sleep better at night because it lowers your core temperature. And a lowered core temperature is really, really great for sleep, which comes full circle to decreasing inflammation. However, what I do is once or twice a week, something that kind of gets me into that more intense, kind of uncomfortable cold state. Like I actually have a cold pool at my house, like meaning I have a little pool, but I just don't heat it. Right? And I get in there a couple of times a week, and I have a little underwater MP3 player, so I'll listen to an audiobook or a podcast.
Wow.
And I'll just kind of swim around the pool. I don't like lap swim. I'll just kind of move around and swing my arms and legs to keep the water cold against my body. And you shiver a little bit, and you get out, and you don't take a hot shower after, right? You force your body to burn calories and to warm up and to get the white adipose to brown adipose tissue conversion by kind of like warming itself. So I find that to be far more sustainable for me versus the stress and the discomfort. And I really don't want to do this every day.
Right.
Thing that comes along with like trying to do a 20-minute cold soak every day.
Yeah.
So ultimately, little brief exposures to cold a couple of times a day, paired with once or twice a week, getting yourself to where you're really, really shivering, kind of exposing the body to a little bit of cold. It's just like exercise, right? You wouldn't do an incredibly hard work,out muscle damaging workout every day. You'd move every day, right? You expose your body to some form of blood flow every day, and then every once in a while you do like that hard workout that provides you with the big metabolic stimulus, and then you kind of go back into cruise control mode versus like trying to do a hard workout, getting 2 weeks in, getting injured, getting burnt out. Kind of the same thing with cold. The other thing that I really like to pair with cold, because there's some interesting research on this and its ability to do what is called lysing of fat cells, actually breaking open and destroying of fat cells, is heat. Infrared heat, like near and far infrared heat specifically, or even just getting yourself in like a dry sauna to the point where you're pretty hot, has been shown to upregulate expression of what's called heat shock protein, which can increase metabolic rate and can produce better stress resilience, a whole host of pretty positive metabolic effects.
Talk about the heat shock proteins, because a lot of people have heard about it, and I'd love for you to do a little bit of a deeper dive.
It's basically just a protein in your body that is protective of cells and allows you to be able to withstand stressors, whether that's exercise stressors or heat stressors or, ironically enough, cold stressors. It basically, think of it like building extra armor for the cells. Well, when you expose yourself to kind of uncomfortable levels of heat, you actually express more of these proteins, in addition to nitric oxide for blood flow and increased metabolic activity. And the skin is the body's largest detoxification organ, so we see a loss of a lot of toxins and metals through the skin, which is also great for losing fat, because otherwise a lot of that would be stored in fat cells. And so what I like to do, if you have the ability, is you can count like your morning fat burning exercise, for example, as a visit to a sauna. You can even do this a couple of times a week as kind of like one of your morning routines. And I actually have a sauna at my house, and I go in there almost every morning when I'm at home. So when I talk about this easy morning fat burning stuff, I like to go in the sauna for 20 or 30 minutes and move around and exercise a little bit, do some push-ups, and then I finish up with the cold. So I get that double whammy effect. Yeah. Same thing, do it in the fasted state with the caffeine in the system, but that again is a very potent, practical fat loss strategy.
Right. I love it. And I love that you went deeper into the different temperatures. It's something that everyone is thinking about and talking about, and the saunas and the different types of saunas. It's really powerful.
Right.
So what else?
If there was anything else that I could identify, it would be this idea of low-level physical activity spread throughout the day. And this seems very intuitive and almost like, keep it simple, stupid when it comes to strategy. But this is something that I think flies under the radar. People sit too much. I'm sitting here talking to you right now, Naomi, and this is probably the longest I will sit all day. And it's very odd for me to be sitting without constantly shifting positions. What I mean by that is at my desk at home, not only do I have a little hand crank on the desk where the desk can move up and down, but I've got a little soft balance mat. I've got one of these wobble boards. I have one of these little walking treadmills. I've got like a stool that I can lean against. I have a chair too, right? They say sitting is the new smoking, but that's not true. Right, because if you stand all day, you're going to have as many joint issues and discomfort as in varicose veins and all that jazz if you sat all day. Sitting is just one of the positions that you can be in during the day. Lunging, kneeling, standing, moving. So that idea of defying our built-in societal expectations that you need to sit. When I walk into the doctor's office and they tell me to take a seat, I say, I'm fine, thank you. And I'm the guy standing there at the doctor's office in the corner, like stretching, and I'm doing some body weight squats. Same thing at the airport, right? All these people are hunched over at the airport, sitting in these giant chairs, reading a newspaper, reading a book, or dinking around their cell phones. So what are they going to be doing for 2 hours in the airplane? Sitting some more. right? So when I'm waiting for the flight to leave, like I'm walking, if I'm getting work done on my computer or my phone, I'm literally just like pacing back and forth at the gate. I'm dropping down, I'm doing stretches. I even have like a little jump rope and elastic band in my bag that I can take out and do exercises with. But you do need to somewhat figure out, even if you're not, let's say a gardener, or like how many people are gardeners or hunters or like, you know, are working hardcore farming out in the field all day long? Not that many people, right? And so we need to figure out how to simulate these type of hunter-gatherer, gardener-esque activities in our day-to-day existence when we're at a cubicle or in an office or in a situation where we otherwise sit. So I constantly ask myself all day long, am I moving? Am I moving? Nice. Am I stimulating my body? Like, you should get to the end of the day where I talk about doing that hard workout session, and it should almost be an option because you've stayed physically active all day long. Like, if you skip that exercise session at the end of the day, it shouldn't hurt you that much because you've been moving all day long. And there's some, you know, when I go to a conference, a busy conference, for example, I do cold shower morning, cold shower evening, and my only rule is that for every hour that goes by during the day, I got to do 30 burpees. Right. So I'll sneak away. I'll be off in the corner of the hotel room or the conference or back up in my hotel room. I know it takes me 2 minutes to do 30 burpees. Or by the end of the day, you know, if I'm at a conference for, let's say, you know, 8 hours, I've done 240 burpees. I've gotten, you know, a good, you know, 4 to 10 minutes of cold exposure, and my body has stayed in fat burning mode. And I think that a lot of people who want to lose weight need to get into this mode where they're like in defiance of the societal expectations to just like sit or be in one position all day long. So you and me can get up and do some jumping jacks.
Absolutely, yeah. I can't wait. Ben, you have something called potty training. What is this stuff?
Okay, so basically it's very, very simple. It relates to this whole idea of constantly moving throughout the day, constantly keeping your metabolism elevated. So when I'm at a restaurant and I need to get up and go to the bathroom, I do 40 air squats in the bathroom, like in the bathroom stall. Just
40
like 40
air squats in the bathroom.
Yeah, it takes like a minute, right? Just like up, down, up, down, up, down. When I'm on an airplane, it's 20. Every time you go in the bathroom, the butt has to touch the toilet seat for it to count as a squat.
That is awesome.
And, you know, I'll go on like if I'm sitting at a restaurant for 2 hours, you know, again, with it, you do the math, you know, sometimes I'll do like 120 squats when I'm at a restaurant, or, you know, 80 squats on an airplane. And again, it's just a little strategy, a little rule that you can use to keep your metabolism elevated during the day.
I love it. So just to finish up, you started your podcast over like 10 years ago. You were one of the first, right? And it is such a pleasure and such an honor to be able to learn from you and all of your exploration and insight and guidance. I mean, I think you've helped millions of people, and I just want to say rock on. It's incredible.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's really good.
Yeah, for the past 10 years, twice a week I've been podcasting, and it's a great way to dish out knowledge to people, but it's also a great way to kind of keep myself constantly researching and trying to stay on the cutting edge of this stuff. So
well, you're definitely on the cutting edge, so it's incredible.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on. I'm honored.
If you see how great a shape he's in, that proves exactly what he's talking about.
You're right. And I went and had dinner with him that night after the interview, and it's truly fascinating to see how much information that guy has. The interview ended, but he just kept going. And that's why he's a New York Times bestselling author.
And that's why we're bringing it to you. Naomi, come on, I can't believe this is our 9th and final episode, because I really, honestly, on behalf of everybody who's been watching, and for myself, it's been an honor to sit here with you and watch you just dispense this great knowledge to everybody around the country. Really, thank you.
Montel, thank you so much. It's about these experts and the information that they bring to all of us to transform our lives, to help us understand that there is a different way, that we can fight the chronic disease, that we can fight the obesity, and that we can win and make our lives healthier and happier ultimately.
Absolutely. Well, look, if you at home have really enjoyed this episode and every single one of our episodes, then you know what you can do. First off, you can just click one of those buttons down below, and it's going to tell you how you can purchase episodes, all 9 of them, and make it part of your home library. And you can then continue to share it with friends and make sure they get the same information. Look, I will say it one more time. I have never seen an information series on any topic that is put together, the level of expert that you alone sought out, reached out to, and got them to actually give this kind of information out on camera. Thank you again, Naomi, really, honestly.
Thank you, Montel, and thank you to all of the experts for sharing your wealth of information.
Thanks for joining us. You know what you got to do? Click down below.